Will House of the Dragon set other streaming services on fire?
And why has Telstra said it's Wi-Fi free at only some payphones?
And what does the streaming and free-to-air future of the AFL look like? Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Aussie Broadband, changing the game with their award-winning network and Australian-based support. Hey there, welcome back to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the tech podcast where we catch up with Australia's leading technology journalists to dive into the big tech stories of the week. I'm Adam Turner, joined as always by Alex Kidman, a man who is still coming to terms with seeing the 11th Doctor's naked ass on the television. Now, Alex, we're trying to avoid most House of the Dragon spoilers here, but I don't think anyone expected that. Which other Doctor Who actors do you think would be right at home in Westeros?
Well, Adam, you say you don't think people expected that, but the reality is that Westeros is just part of the Doctor Who universe. The number of Doctor Who actors in Game of Thrones, it's like 25 plus actors.
Wow.
Stretching all the way back to someone who was in a story, and I kid you not, this is true, who was in a Doctor Who story in 1965. So basically, it's part of the cast, albeit that I'm just glad we didn't see Matt Smith. Let's put it that way.
True. John Pertwee in his birthday suit might be a bit wrinkly these days.
He's in a shower in a Doctor Who episode. You can see the tattoo on his arm. So they've been there, done that.
Personally, I'm still coming to terms with the fact that Sanford's Detective Sergeant Andy Wainwright is the king. I'm waiting for him to say, "Damon, don't go being a twat now." And then Damon turns around and says, "I wouldn't give you the satisfaction." Anyway, while Alex deals with the mental image of Taemon Targaryen wearing nothing but a platinum blonde wig and a bow tie.
A bad platinum blonde wig.
This week we're joined once again by the king of streaming. It's TV Blackbox viewer advocate Steve Molk. Steve, Game of Thrones is also known for its blood and guts. Do you think we'll expect a similarly high body count in the House of the Dragon?
Hey there. Yes, I would expect that we will get lots of people dead. In fact, without spoiling anything, I've seen a few episodes ahead, and lots of people die.
I am shocked. Mark me as shocked.
Spoilers, this is set hundreds of years before Game of Thrones,
Yes.
right? So logically speaking, everybody dies?
Well, very technically, it's just whether or not we get to see them die on camera. Look, at the core of House of the Dragon, like Game of Thrones, it is an epic medieval fantasy realm. So that instantly means whenever one house or one group of people go to war with another group of people, largely speaking, the biggest asset they have is thousands of people to run at thousands of other people with swords. So lots of people die.
That's basically the entire mathematics of the Middle Ages, isn't it?
It's pretty great. I have more than you. I will win.
Yes. So, as you can guess, Steve's here this week because HBO's prequel to Game of Thrones has finally dropped on Foxtel and Binge. But before we dive into what that means for the new streaming landscape, Telstra came out this week and said it's free Wi-Fi for everyone.
Woo, come on.
Alex, what's the story here?
So this follows on from a story we talked about last year where Telstra said, hey, remember payphones? Remember when they were a thing? Well, now you can just use payphones for free. They're just phones. They're not pay phones. But years and years and years ago, Telstra had set up a Wi-Fi network, at least partially based around those payphones. So when the payphones got those pink tops, they added what they called the Telstra Air network, and that was for Telstra customers only, public Wi-Fi network otherwise. And what they've said this week is basically the Telstra Air payphones are going to go free, but there is a catch. Telstra currently runs around 12,000 or so payphones, but the free payphones, that's only about 3,000 of them.
I thought you were going to say 3 for a second.
Yeah, there's 3 in the country. You got to find them. Is that forever, or is it eventually going to spread to them all?
So what they've said is they want to get it up to that full set over the next few years. It's not really clear why, though, because they'd all be part of the Telstra Air network. They'd all have to do the same kind of authentication. So I don't exactly get... I think it's an interesting gesture, and we'll get into the competitive landscape around that in a second. But I don't exactly get why you do just a small chunk of them and not all of them at once.
So is Telstra Air dead. I'm trying to remember. Telstra Air started years ago, and it was this: if you've got a Telstra modem at home, and you're happy to turn on a free Wi-Fi network to share it with other people, then you can access other people's, and we'll all be happy friends with this
And
Telstra
how
Air
many
network.
people did that?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think very many at all. I was wondering if it was already dead and buried, but every now and then Alex brings it up on the show and says, "Okay, you get Telstra Air with this plan, or you don't." Is it now proper dead?
Well, not exactly. And I think the big benefit for people who were Telstra customers with that Telstra Air deal was not necessarily Telstra Air. It was the fact that you actually got access to global hotspots as well. So Telstra was
Yes.
joining
Yeah.
one of those global hotspot coalitions, the name of which eludes me for the moment. But when you traveled, in theory, you could hook into those. I tried a couple of times when I was traveling. I never had much luck with it. But in theory, it was there. Telstra Air itself is still sort of a thing, but I think it also became a lot less relevant when Telstra switched from you get so many gig on your mobile plan and then it's $10 a gig for every bit of data you use afterwards to you get so many gig on most of your plans and either we cut you off dead or you get a slower capped speed but as much data as you like kind of dealio. Because at that point, you didn't really need to go chase down a phone booth to get free Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
It's also worth pointing out it wasn't just people's modems; it was also Telstra stores, and
Yes.
presumably they have not been mentioned in terms of this payphone deal. So presumably they will still have a Telstra Wi-Fi which their customers may be able to use. They haven't really said anything about that.
So, Steve, are you a free Wi-Fi guy? Do you hunt it out wherever you go?
I used to. I used to be, but then I also used to be a Telstra customer back when it cost you, literally your second born child
Mm.
for an extra gigabyte per month. Like that was just the cost of doing business, and for the work that I was doing at the time, I needed to have a Telstra phone, so that just was how that landed. Nowadays, we are, as my family, are Vodafone customers, and we have more mobile data than we could possibly consume a month. I need not hunt out a mobile. Well, there are some times I will acknowledge because I am generally a city or Central Coast kind of person, so I'm largely in Vodafone's coverage area. But my work give me a Telstra phone, so I've got mobile data everywhere I go.
Yeah, I've never quite understood why. I guess it might be because I've never really been on a prepaid sort of plan where I really had to count
Mm.
every bit of mobile data. I've always had enough mobile data that I would rather use my mobile data than risk going on some dodgy Wi-Fi network and not knowing what it's connected to, who's on the back end, whether or not I should
Yeah.
be using a VPN. I just feel safer using my own data, but I can understand why if you're on a tiny allowance and you're trying to make it go a long
Oh,
way, particularly as you say, because the telco is going to screw you an arm and a leg if you go over. Then why free Wi-Fi would be more attractive?
so here's an example of when I have used free Wi-Fi in the last 3 years. I was traveling through the Hunter Valley. For some reason, I had left my work phone at home. So I was only on Vodafone's network, and it's patchy as you
Mm.
travel
Mm.
between, Maitland up to Tamworth. We pulled in at Singleton Macca's, I think it was. No, it wasn't Singleton. One of the little stops that basically has a Macca's and an equestrian place, and that's about it. And I used the Macca's free Wi-Fi to do some work. Now, A, that was a bad idea because the throughput on that is diabolical. And B, I was nervous because it was free Wi-Fi, honestly. I agree. I think that for those that run prepaid plans and have concern about how much data they use, though, even those prepaid plans are becoming overly generous with their data allocations. Um, I guess there are still some people that use or want to use free Wi-Fi, though I would offer these days if you're doing it and you're not using a VPN, aren't you the problem?
So, as the person in the room who is on a prepaid plan, I will second what you're saying there, Steve. I have more data than I know what to do with, and
Yeah.
that's prepaid as well. That prepaid postpaid difference, I think, doesn't make as much of a difference these days above a certain level. But I can 100% see two groups for whom public Wi-Fi is a good thing, or at least an accessible thing. And yes, also I agree, use a VPN when you're using it because not
Yeah.
secure in any way. That is absolutely true. Those two groups being teenagers or young people who might not have a phone plan that includes data because mum and dad don't want them to have one,
Sure.
whether or
Sure.
not that's
Yep.
a good thing or a bad thing. But also that core group for whom setting the payphones free was a boon. And that's people in crisis. That's people
Yep,
who might be
true.
homeless. That's people for whom those kind of sources of access can lead to shelter, can lead to employment. There's generally
Accessing
a net
government
good.
services, right?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. There's a net good. Having said that, I don't think this is 100% altruistic on Telstra's part,
no.
because we shouldn't forget that it actually receives government money for running those payphones. And I can't help but to think that this might be part of their play to say, hey, look, the payphone bit, even though it still is apparently used quite a bit, it may be not so relevant to as many people. But hey,
Yeah.
look, we now provide internet as well. We provide a safety blanket, even though, as you say, with public Wi-Fi, it might not be that safe.
It's an interesting proposition. I think that what they're trying to offer, and I agree all of the reasons. It absolutely Telstra. This is not an altruism for them. This is a marketing opportunity that might have some public benefit. So, well, congratulations at least to that end. For people who aren't in that position, and I would say trying to be generous, that's probably the bulk of people in Australia. There's all sorts of free Wi-Fi everywhere. Like, I walk through my local shopping centre, and there's this particularly interesting crush point where it's a three-way, and on one corner is Telstra, one corner is Optus, and one corner is Vodafone. And they're all blasting out their own free Wi-Fis. And if you go a little bit further down, there's the Apple Store blasting out its free Wi-Fi. And without sort of drawing a line, the Apple free Wi-Fi is far faster than anything that the telcos are offering, which is why conveniently you see the shopping centres just happen to put a couple of couches out the front or near the Telstra's, the Apple Store, so that you can access their very excellent free Wi-Fi. Look, I think that there will be people that will benefit from it. It is absolutely a marketing ploy on Telstra's behalf, and I would say the reason why it's such a small number to start with a few years for the rest of them is probably down to connections to their fiber optic network.
So on the free Apple public Wi-Fi being really good, I have a great anecdote, and it actually relates to this podcast.
Yes.
Or to how this podcast came to be to a certain extent.
You stood in an Apple store and recorded an episode.
No, not so much
I've
that.
done that for Macworld.
This was in New York, and this would have been about 10 years ago now, I think. Adam and I were both in New York.
I was going to say, was it when we were both there? Yeah.
We're both in New York at the same time, and I was traveling, and because I was a freelancer at the time, and data was stupid expensive, I did not have any kind of roaming SIM, no roaming arrangement whatsoever. I'm walking around the streets of New York with no connectivity whatsoever. My phone is in my pocket, though.
Yes.
Because I realized, when I get back to the hotel, stuff's going to work. And then suddenly all these messages start pinging through to my phone like crazy. And it's like, what on earth how is this suddenly working? And what had happened is I'd walked a little bit too close to Grand Central Station, and there's an Apple store at Grand Central Station. And if you've logged in at any Apple store,
the certificate's
in
the same.
world, which I had done in the Sydney store, it'll go, oh yeah, I know this network, right, I'm on. And it had grabbed it had grabbed everything. I got everything I needed to get before I even saw the Apple store was there. It's just I looked at the Wi-Fi and went, oh, that's an Apple Wi-Fi. There must be a store nearby.
Wow.
Went online because the connection was good enough and looked it up and went, oh, right, it must be in there. Walked in to find where it was. But that you can, and again, that was insecure. It was not the smartest thing, but then it did it automatically to me anyway.
Just quietly, without getting super nerdy, how amazing!
Hey, that's what we do. Like,
sure.
That's our
You've
niche.
been on the show enough, Steve. You should know this stuff.
More than once. How amazing is it that the decision made by Apple was that ostensibly the consumer experience won over the security experience? That they made the same certificate, the same authentication process be a global network, so that, like what happened to you, Alex, when you walked past it just went, I've been on the Apple network before, here I go. And it connected up and did what it should do, in a trusted network context. Like, by rights, you'd have separate certificates and all sorts of, like, you'd have to choose to join the Apple New York Grand Central Station network versus the Apple Sydney. It's just amazing that that's how they play it for, like I said, consumer over security.
They like consumer dollars, Steve.
I've heard, says the man with only Apple devices in his house.
Speaking of consumer dollars, I would think a lot of them are being thrown at Foxtel and Binge right now. It's we've just seen the first episode of House of the Dragon drop.
Mhm.
It is the prequel to Game of Thrones. It has been released 11 years. So it's 11 years since the
Yeah.
first episode of Game of Thrones dropped. A little bit has changed in the media landscape since then. How much did you have to pay? Here's a question without notice. Back in the day, first season of Game of Thrones, 2011, what was the cheapest way to watch? I suppose the only way to watch it would have been to have an actual Foxtel connection at home. Yes?
Well, there were two ways. One, you had to have an IQ2, maybe?
Yeah.
An IQ sitting in your house to connect up with a satellite dish on your roof. Or you were one of the fortunate very few like me who had Foxtel sending you DVDs of the episodes as previews.
Oh, that's a handful of people.
Like, it's
handful of very
minuscule
lucky
numbers.
people. Yeah.
The only way to get it was a satellite dish on your roof and watch
What
it
were
like
you
that.
paying back then? Like, what was the minimum amount of money? Because you had to pay for the package, and then you had to pay for the service, and then pay extra for the HBO package. So you would have been paying at least $70 a month, probably more.
You'd be pushing 100, nearly 110, 115 odd, because it was to get
I would
to
have
that.
said about 120 to 150.
To get to the premium drama, it wasn't as simple as base package plus premium drama. It was they made you buy package to get to premium drama package. So it was a significant amount of coin, and that only really shifted once they seriously dropped Binge, and Binge is only 4 or 5 years old.
Oh, so I'll disagree with you there, Steve. And actually, there is, of course, the third way that an awful lot of Australians.
Yes, we'll get to that in a minute.
So of course,
sailing the high seas. But
as my brother-in-law likes to say,
Foxtel, and I want to say this was around season 3.
Yeah,
season 3, season 4 started doing really specific promo packages.
Where you could just
get access, and it was
the season of Game of Thrones.
It was something like about $30 to $40 a month for their IP-based package. So this was their streaming package, so the visual quality was not superb.
Yep.
But you could do it for quite a bit less. You're right, Binge absolutely slices that right down. But they've been aware of the draw of it, and they've been willing to bargain, not from day one, but certainly a little earlier than Binge.
Oh, mate, if you were the person, so if you were paying $120, $130, $150 for your premium Foxtel package, and you rang up and said, we're cancelling, hands down there were deals to be done because Foxtel wanted to hang on to you. Nowadays, not so much. But that's because they have kind of soiled their own nest. There's lots of different ways for you to be able to, I'll say legally in the sailing the high seas methodology, access the content. And even just that conversation around Foxtel's early IP offering of, let's get Game of Thrones and you can just watch that 8 years ago. Now, they, both with their new IQ5, really are prioritizing IP delivery of their content over the satellite or via Binge. Now, I acknowledge Binge don't offer it to us in 4K yet, but if you've got an IQ5, 4K all the way, baby. Like, you get the dragons in, you can smell the scales through the screen kind of stuff.
So jumping forward now in 2022, what's the least amount I could pay to watch it legitimately? What would that be on Binge, I would assume?
Yeah, it'll be a Binge, $25 a month deal, I think it is, or I can't recall. I would have thought it was even less than that. I'm a nerd that's fortunate that gets given Binge, so I can't even tell you what Binge costs.
We'll call it a fifth of the price, maybe
easily.
Less.
Yeah. And in part, it is Foxtel wanting to address sailing the high seas. It is, though they used that as a marketing ploy. Do not be confused and think that it was all bad for poor old Foxtel that people were, air quotes, stealing Game of Thrones. That was a huge marketing thing for them. And now we have the fact that IP streaming for, video technology, whether it's via Foxtel now or your IQ5 satellite or IP, or whether it's Binge, there's a plethora of ways that you can access it to be able to get out. Alex, thank you. Was it $18 a month for Binge, give or take, for the 4K end or the top end?
A top end would appear to be $18 a month. I'll say I'm not a Binge subscriber myself.
But so that's straight away the key difference is that Foxtel went, it is so important for us. And not just it's so important to us, we're going to make it available on Binge same time as the US as we do with Foxtel. That used to be a Foxtel only premise for some of their, really important things. If you want to see it first, you go to Foxtel. Binge will get it when it's finished airing a bit later. But now they are Binge hosted their premiere event in Sydney. It wasn't Foxtel, Binge hosted it. If that's not a sign of the times of where Foxtel think is the best way for them to spend their marketing dollar in Australia for the HBO premium content and everything else that they're shoving through the Binge pipe, I don't know what is.
So is Foxtel still playing that game where they try to pretend that they're not really KO and Binge? Because I wrote a piece about KO once, and I said it was Foxtel's KO. And then I heard from Binge's PR people saying, no, it's not Foxtel's KO. Don't say that. And I wrote back and said, lady, you work for Foxtel and you're doing Binge's PR. So don't try and tell me it's not Foxtel.
Yeah, Stream Motion will jump up and down on that pretty quick. Sorry, Alex.
Yeah.
I
was going to say it's that News Corp model of a billion different divisions doing somewhat the same thing,
but they're trying
in different ways.
Pretend like, you're sticking it to Foxtel by getting Binge.
No, you're spot on. That is absolutely their marketing line around why they try and distance Binge from Foxtel. Yeah. It's why you don't see a Foxtel logo anywhere on Binge. It's why Stream Motion is the parent company for KO and Binge and Flash, so that it doesn't look like you're giving the Murdochs any of your hard-earns. And here I am sticking it to the man to get my dragons when I'm just giving the same guy some money a different way.
Yeah.
So, Steve, based off those figures, if you wanted it in HD, you're looking at, what are we talking about, $48 or something like that to watch the entire 10-episode season, because it's going to span over basically 3 months once you chunk it all together. That means that when it hits digital or Blu-ray or whatever, in theory, it's likely to be cheaper, but do we know that it's going to do that in any kind of timely fashion yet?
Oh, well, I mean, that's going to be at the mercy of HBO, really, isn't it, as to when that lines up into that next phase of delivery methodology. I think, look, the short answer is it will be it's a very, very, very small market now of people that want to collect it on the DVD box set or that kind of vibe.
But I'm also thinking like your Apple TVs, your Google Play movies, that kind of, because that's often been cited as a cheaper way to get, back when Game of Thrones was a big thing, the cheapest way to do it was to say, right, wait till after the season and get the season through them.
Well, look, you'll certainly be able to buy it on Fetch and Google Play and Apple TV when the season is done, and probably pay anywhere between $2 to $5 to $10 an episode, whatever it's going to be. I would say for the effort that you would pour into doing that, given the plethora and it is high quality content that is in the Binge library, don't waste your time. Like, just pay the sub. This is the real sweet spot, I think, for... I acknowledge that if you want to watch all of the content, your pay per month is creeping up to $120 really quickly. However, if you want to be a little bit smart and say, well, this one is non-negotiable, but this one I'll do a season run for, because it's all a la carte, right? There's no penalty if you sign up for Binge now and then drop out in 3 months' time and come back in another 3, 6, 12 months, whatever it is. You just sign up again. You just don't get a free, free 7 days or whatever it is. You just don't own it. So the subscription model where your pricing is sub $20, I think is, even in these times where inflation is starting to grip our testicles in a way that is uncomfortable, it's actually a smart move. And this is where we also lean into, we've had the conversation before about password sharing. Household A has the Binge subscription, Household B, Netflix, Household C, Stan as the example. Spread the love around and everybody gets to see everything, with each house only paying 20-ish bucks a month.
But the problem here is 4K though, because right now the only way, correct me if I'm wrong, the only way I can watch it in 4K is to have a Foxtel IQ5. If I give my $15 a month to Binge, I'm watching it in HD like a schmuck.
or wait until the end of the season and
Exactly.
buy it,
That's what I was
rent
going to
it
say.
from the second tier
That's where it
channels.
becomes, because if you buy it from Apple or Google or Fetch, you'll be able to buy it in 4K, and you might be paying $5 or $6 an episode. But compared to having to have signed up and got an IQ5, you might still be coming out in front. So it depends if you care
Oh.
about that 4K picture quality.
There's a couple of things even in that. First of all, we sort of, I poo-pooed the idea that if you want to own it, subscription is not going to be a way that gives it to you because you only own it for as long as you're subscribed. Buying it in a digital format, we've already proven that you don't own it.
Oh,
You
yeah,
own the
absolutely
rights
not.
to watch it. So again, if Google decide to withdraw, or HBO Max withdraw House of the Dragon from the Google Play store, and you've bought it, it's gone.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter that you're giving them the monies. The other part of it, though, is that independent of, the pros and cons of owning an IQ5, it actually doesn't cost that much in the grand scheme of things. And for you to then sign up for an IP-only Foxtel service via the IQ5, it's actually become far more competitive a price point. I will say it is absolutely not as cheap as Binge. However, you have the capacity with your IQ5, of course, to record it offline, to watch it in 4K, to do all of that sort of stuff. So if you're someone that is precious about the quality of the streaming experience and you've got the internet service to be able to back it up, an IQ5 is actually not a bad proposition compared to paying, let's say hypothetically, it's $5.99 an episode, $60 in the season just to watch Game of Thrones in hypothetically 4K after the fact versus, okay, so I've spent, $200 for an IQ5 or a bit more, plus then my sub. I'm paying for the service, amortize the cost of the box. Look at me being an accountant. Amortize the box of the cost across your subscription experience, but you're probably coming out kind of broke even if you're going to do that across a year or a couple of years, or even, dare I say it, the life of the series on Game of Thrones, on Foxtel.
Which could be 7 or 8 seasons, the way we're
And
going.
you get to watch Game of Thrones again in 4K.
Hang on, before we go any further, it's just occurred to me that we keep talking about the IQ5.
Sure.
But if you've got an IQ4 and it's on the satellite
And it's been
service,
updated.
and it's been updated, then you can probably get it in 4K that way as well, assuming you're paying for all the right packages and stuff.
Yes, but you can't, if I'm a new customer, I don't think I can buy an IQ4, can I?
I don't know, but what I'm saying is, if you've got an IQ4
Oh,
right now,
yes,
don't think you need
existing
to chuck it in
customer.
the
Yeah, yeah.
don't
Yes.
think you need to chuck it in the bin and buy an IQ5. The IQ4 that you've got, if you're using satellite dish on your roof, will quite possibly give you 4K. It's
Yes.
worth checking that before you upgrade to an IQ5 just for 4K.
Oh, and absolutely. And as I
Yeah.
said, part of the hook that Foxtel have made a big noise about is that when Game of Thrones season 1 came out, you could not watch it in 4K. And they
Well,
have
they didn't
made
make it in 4K.
well, whether they've remastered it or they've upscaled it,
Yeah.
you can now watch the entirety of Game of Thrones in 4K.
I think it's been remastered and upscaled and stuff. I'm pretty sure they weren't shooting it in 4K back then.
So, Steve, I mean, you do raise the point here, though, that this does seem to be a really important show for Foxtel. I mean, I noticed they virtually never tend to acknowledge their competitors, but they put out this incredibly salty tweet on Monday morning.
That doesn't sound like
about,
Foxtel at all.
Not at all.
About Sandman, the Netflix series, ostensibly. And I'll read it out
That
here.
it was short and dumpy?
Dreams.
Holy shit! I was standing 3 feet away from Patrick Delaney when he allegedly said that, and he allegedly said that.
I'm not going there. I'm not going there. Their tweet said, "Dreams didn't make them kings; dragons did."
Holy shit!
Which I just thought, wow. Well, that's a shot across the bows.
Here's the thing: there have been some really interesting numbers come out post the first episode come out in America and, of course, here in Australia. The figures officially out of the US on Tuesday morning, our time, was that HBO Premium Cable, HBO Max, and whatever other service they made it available through, 10 million people watched that thing. Now, we go, in America, 330 million people. That's not heaps. That's the largest audience for a single episode of any HBO show ever.
Really? So bigger than the finale of Game of Thrones?
They are saying it is the biggest audience ever to watch the premiere episode
to watch the premiere episode.
Oh, no, to watch any episode, but
any
because it was the
episode, all right, that's a bigger
premiere
deal.
episode in how it landed. So they're shouting about that. HBO are over the moon that they've got so much attention there. Then you've got Foxtel going, hey, it's the biggest thing for us. Like, it was huge numbers for them coming out of what they wanted. And, of course, it will only get better in a week's time when we get to see the catch-up numbers that, this many people added on to watch House of the Dragon. Add to that, the rumor was that HBO, and this could be HBO plus their partners in their regions, i.e. plus Foxtel Binge, but HBO allegedly marketing House of the Dragon had spent $250 million just in marketing the episode. The season.
I wouldn't doubt it for a second, given one of the weirder things that they did was pay for a prominent sponsorship plug across All Elite Wrestling's flagship show, Dynamite. Like, ring aprons, the whole thing was all House of the Dragons. Had nothing really to do with what was going on in the ring, but it was just like, House of the Dragons is coming, you must know about it. But at the same time, Steve, isn't it the case? And I brought this up, really important for Foxtel, but HBO itself is sort of in trouble at the moment. I mean, they're cutting shows, they're cutting stuff off HBO Max, and there's this whole argument about whether or not they should or shouldn't get premiere movies in the US.
Well, yeah, as John Oliver would put it, their new owner daddy is dropping shows 6 away from Sunday. So Warner Brothers Discovery own now HBO and all of its subsidiary bits. As you said, they've shelved the Batgirl film that was ready for release. They just went, nut tax right off. We'll take that to the bank. There's some crazy moves. They've allegedly dropped a whole bunch of Sesame Street episodes.
This is just criminal.
What?
This is just wrong. You don't do that to Grover.
No, well, this is the question. We
Nobody
don't know which
Grover
episodes.
in the corner.
Yeah.
We don't know. I hear he's at the end of the book.
We don't know. Come on.
Grow up, kids.
We don't know which episodes. We don't know. Week and a bow tie.
This is getting out of control. Although you do know that the Muppets / Sesame Street did a Game of Thrones parody, right?
Of course I do.
It was spectacular. It was about counting, I think. The push into that is just there's some questionable moves by WBD around what it proved with the Batgirl decision is that no show is safe. It doesn't matter that you've got it ready to hit the market. They will take it, say thank you, and it will get covered in dust before anybody gets to see it. So it is a huge tick in HBO's all of their boxes as far as their new daddy goes. That they may have spent a lot of money, but the marketing, the feedback they've got from the people watching and hearing, and the social news and noise and all of that sort of stuff, along with the subscriber boost, super critical. Add into that the allegedly millions of dollars that Foxtel pay HBO for the exclusive Australian deal, and will be, look, whether or not HBO Max is about to launch in Australia, super critically, Foxtel had the deal when House of the Dragon launched in Australia, so the only way you will see House of the Dragon in Australia first run is on Foxtel, no matter what happens from this point on, unless
legitimately cough.
WBD throw a truckload of money at them to say, sorry, we're just getting out of the contract. That's the escape clause for anything, though, right?
But I would have said that the other side of that, though, for Foxtel, is that HBO, home of quality drama, they're the exclusive home of it. But if they're shelving series, it's home of less quality drama. It's less of a pull. And once you get past the 10 episodes of this season, and look, I don't think they won't renew it for at least one more. But once you get past that draw of that season, if they've got less stuff, if they're offering less stuff, it's less of a draw for Foxtel. They're kind of at the mercy of what the US corporate parents do in terms of its value to the Foxtel value proposition, aren't they?
But that's output deals writ large and how they have been since time, in memoriam. The challenge for Foxtel is that while their commercial competitors, 7, 9, 10, well, 10, let's say 10 out of the picture because of its now relationship with Paramount, 7 and 9 used to have output deals with ABC, NBC, and they would go, right, we've signed up, we will take your big things and we will take your shitty things that will air at whatever o'clock. People might not ever see them, but we have to take them. That's part of the deal. That's been transformed in, the life of Game of Thrones to now, no, we're going to pick and choose. We're just going to pick the shows that we want to get from you, but we have a relationship that means that we get first run rights, so we get first pick rights. But we don't have to do everything. In the HBO scenario, it is an output deal in the classic sense. They get everything that HBO line up. So that means new series of True Detective. That means, the Mayor of Easttown. That means all of that sort of amazing stuff that, to HBO's credit, they are still continuing to make. And I think there will be a very significant argument happen between the most important people in HBO and the least important people in Warner Brothers Discovery if the new daddy comes knocking and says, hey, that new show you were going to air, you're not airing it anymore. I think if you pardon the pun, there will be blood.
So we're not talking about what was once the 800-pound gorilla here. Like if this was back in Game of Thrones days, it'd be all about piracy and how many people are pirating and blah, blah, blah. Do you think that's still going to be a major issue? Is it still going to happen? Are we going to hear about it? Do we have any numbers on piracy, early piracy numbers?
Well, ironically, no. Well, maybe not ironically.
Hang on, ironically, no to which of those questions? So I hit you with a lot of questions at once there.
I am yet to see that. Doesn't mean it hasn't been written. I haven't seen an article saying this many people, sailed the seven seas to find the first episode of House of the Dragon. That said, there will always be a market for that because there are always people that think that they are the smartest people in the internet rooms and they have a right to access the content for free.
Well, so doing some digging around this, the funny thing for that first episode is it did leak early.
Yeah.
So there was early access to it. I don't have numbers, but people were clearly keen to do that.
Torrent Freak says hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands that would have to be way down on at the peak of Game of Thrones. They would have been pushing millions.
Oh, yeah, Game of Thrones.
Just in Australia, they were probably pushing that.
Game of Thrones still holds the piracy record, and I think we were at the front of that.
While significant, is a shadow of what it was, and in part because, like we talked about, you can access binge for a couple of coffees a month and see all of the dragons.
It's a movie ticket, basically.
Yeah,
with a lot less stuffing around.
Yes.
And you can see it in 4K without having to download a huge file. It's there when you want it. And that's what we were always saying about piracy is the way you beat piracy is to give people what they want at a decent price.
At a competitive price. I think that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of competition, I mean, I mentioned Sandman as being probably Netflix's current flagship. I guess Cobra Kai will be the next thing they put up against it. And we've also got Amazon doing a Lord of the Rings series. How do you rate their chances of, deflecting some of the interest in House of the Dragon with those kinds of shows?
Well, I'll answer your question with a question, Alex. Without looking at your notes, when does Lord of the Rings on Prime Video premiere?
I honestly couldn't tell you, but I'm not even sure my notes would be able to tell you because it's been a long day and I need coffee. It's my brutally honest answer to that one.
I think it's soon, but I haven't heard nearly as much about it. I saw an article about it in the paper. I want to say September.
Yeah, it is Friday the 2nd of September in Australia that you'll see it land. So about 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the Friday. So Friday in America, midnight is when it'll land. But that's the catch. Like, I think in part, now they did have a massive junket in India, of all places, where they pulled almost anyone that was breathing that wanted to fly to India to interview the cast and the directors and the, all of the people involved to talk about the new Lord of the Rings series. I wasn't important enough, but that's okay. I'm not important at all. I think, honestly, their approach is let's let this week get out of the way and we will get smashed next week with, by the way, Lord of the Rings is starting. Here's all of the things. I think today Prime Video released the final trailer for the series. So they're trying to get it in front of as many people as they can. I'm going to tell you, though, they are now struggling because surely the internet searches would be what happens in episode 2 of House of the Dragon over which ring is up someone's ring on Lord of the Rings.
Am I right in thinking that
Bezos is going to run out of money and only be able to afford 3 spaceships? We've got to do something about this, man.
He won't run out of money.
Am I right in thinking that Lord of the Rings is supposed to be the most expensive made TV show of all time?
I've seen that.
Did I read that somewhere?
anecdotally tossed around.
Yeah.
Certainly they have, similar to HBO, thrown a metric ton of money onto the screen and into special effects and location shooting as much as in studio shooting. So they and of course have tried to do it as COVID aware or as COVID acknowledged as they can. They couldn't always have all of the people in the same room at the same time, or they've had to keep them all in a bunker getting tested every day and that sort of thing. Mate, I'm going to say, even if they did, the proof will be in that first episode pudding.
Hmm.
Because if you are tuning in thinking that it is the much-loved Tolkien book series that you read, or even, to a lesser degree, the Jackson movie series that you watched, it is not either of those.
That's what I want to know.
Somewhere I can hear David Hollingworth crying.
I'm trying to decide if I should because I know my kids couldn't sit down and watch the first episode of House of the Dragon with me, and that was shown pretty quickly as to why.
Yep.
My kids are going to want to watch Lord of the Rings. Are we
Yes.
going to see like a Doctor Who's butt and someone get their bits chopped off in that as well? Do you think it'll be that full on?
I don't think we'll see any nudity, in part because I think the Tolkien estate wouldn't go for it.
Yeah.
I think we will see some pretty big set pieces around battles and wars and people dying and stuff, though I think we won't see it as bloody and gory as the Game of Thrones House of the Dragon approach for the
So
same reason.
basically, if you could sit through the movies, then you reckon the TV show would probably be at about the same level of violence and gore.
I think it'll probably be M, but not a hard M if
Yeah.
we talk about Australian. Whereas, House of the Dragon was M15 plus, no question. All of the reasons listed.
And Steve, I believe, just continuing on with the streaming services, September also has a Disney Plus day. Do we know what they've got lined up for that?
God bless you, Disney. Like, honestly, you've already got Star Wars Day.
Look at me,
Just
look
shut
at me.
It really is a big case of, we're here too, don't forget us. Honestly,
we're only the multi-billion-dollar empire that owns all this IP.
Nobody
Yeah.
puts Mickey in the corner.
there are a few things that they are dropping on Disney Plus Day, which, if I recall correctly, is Thursday, the 8th of September. And the two big ones are Thor: Love and Thunder, landing on the streaming platform. I think it's barely out of the cinemas. So again, there's that shortened second window coming to pass. Yeah. And the Tom Hanks starring live action Robert Zemeckis Pinocchio. That
really
didn't even get to cinemas and apparently was supposed to get to cinemas, but hey presto, it's on Disney Plus.
I keep telling you, Steve, presto is gone. It's not coming back.
Like marketing genius for a name, but not for any of the reasons they thought it was.
It was.
There's other series that are landing. There's a behind the scenes on the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that'll be significant. There's a behind the scenes on Thor: Love and Thunder. So all of that is almost de rigueur for Disney now. When they drop a series or a movie, there's a behind-the-scenes featurette of anywhere between 29 to 54
Here's
minutes.
what we would have put on the DVD extras if DVDs were still a big thing.
That's exactly what it is, right? We are usurping the DVD sales by going, here's what we'd show you. The only thing we miss, and even still, these were often hit and miss in themselves, is some kind of commentary track where you could listen to the director or some of the cast talk about and waffling off into the distance about some weird scene that visually has moved on, but they're still back talking about how I stabbed the guy in the back and the stuntman fell over and blah, blah, blah.
Some of those are amazing, though. I mean, like the Futurama commentary tracks, if you've got the DVDs of those are extraordinary.
So good.
Brendan Fraser on the original Mummy is amazing. I swear, I suspect, I suppose you can afford better lawyers than I can, that he was massively drunk because it's so totally out there.
Amazing.
I miss commentary tracks. I didn't always listen to all of them, but I thought they were great.
Now, see, here's another thing looking back. If we were having this conversation 10 years ago, if you wanted to watch any of this stuff, you would have to pay for ding, 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 Foxtel. That's not the case anymore because Disney's gone direct. The others have gone direct. HBO has gone direct in America, but not here. If you want to watch Game of Thrones, you have to pay for ding, 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 Foxtel.
Well, there
is that going to change? Well, Foxtel / Bing / whatever they are, but still, you've got to give your money to Rupert. Well, do you think that HBO will go direct here?
Yeah, well, that's the allegation. In fact, as recent as this year, and a HBO announcement, I think being pushed by their former owners and now Warner Brothers Discovery, HBO mapped out their HBO Max expansion plans, which while it didn't mention Australia explicitly, if I recall, and I could be very wrong, it kind of broadly swept across the Pacific, like that kind of one day, lad, all of this will be yours. What, the
Yes.
curtains? No, not the curtains, lad. That whole shebang.
All this content you can see before you.
That's right. I suspect at some point HBO Max will land in Australia. I also suspect that Foxtel will fall over themselves backwards to pour money into HBO to make that not be a thing. Because if that left Binge and Foxtel, so will their subscribers.
But surely if HBO was going to go direct in Australia, they've just missed their opportunity by a week. To say we are the only way to watch House of the Dragon in Australia would be a huge way to break into the market.
Oh, for sure. Though, like I inferred, that like now that that's happened, the contract nature of the series airing on Australia First gives Foxtel first rights, dibs to the rest of the season, unless HBO/Warner Brothers Discovery turn up and say, yeah, the contract, we're tearing it up, and here's millions of dollars for you to forget about it.
So we're talking about Foxtel handing over millions of dollars to HBO, but that's not the only people that they hand over. Because if you pay for Foxtel, it's probably for two reasons. It's to see naked Targaryens and it's to see the AFL. They also hand over a shed load of money to them, but that's sort of changing as well, isn't it?
Yeah, we are in the death throes of the next round of AFL broadcast rights with the incumbents, Seven and Foxtel, again in partnership, pushing to be the ongoing broadcasters. However, it's not been smooth sailing within that camp. That's before we talk about the fact that Paramount Plus have been circling and courting Gillan McLachlan, the AFL CEO, who's at the pointy end of this, trying to suggest to him that between 10 and Paramount Plus, they could handle the entirety of the AFL. Now, that would be a hell of a thing if that was to happen.
And
You
a
also
kick in
had
the nuts
Nine.
for Foxtel.
Well, you also had Nine swoop in and say, hey, we'd just like to buy Thursday night. Will you sell us Thursday night? We'll buy Thursday night.
Yeah.
That's been tramped on because largely the AFL aren't in a position where they want to do an NFL style different nights to different networks situation. They would much rather a Foxtel 7 kind of conglomerate or a 10 holus bolus thing, because it allows them to go, it is your problem. We have sold you the product. It is up to you now to negotiate what goes on. So as the example, the current broadcast rights do not allow Seven to stream the AFL. Understandably, because Foxtel have Kaya that they want to protect and encourage people to sign up for and those sorts of things. So we see in the ratings when they come out, Nine have the streaming rights and they are reasonably helpful to their overall numbers for the NRL. You can, if you want to watch the NRL in Australia on free to air, it's all Nine. If you want to watch the rest of all of the NRL in Australia, you go to Foxtel. For Seven and Foxtel, it was a bone of contention in the last rights, the big rights deal, where Foxtel went, we want exclusive streaming, and Seven went, all right, so we're not going to pay as much. So the whole deal meant that Seven pay a smaller amount because they're not showing us the majority of the games every week and they're not streaming it.
I would think your average punter, though, is thinking, I don't care about all that. All I want to care about is, will I have to hand over my money to Foxtel to watch what I thought was going to be a free-to-air game? Now, the government actually stepped in this week and had something to say about it, didn't they?
Yeah, the comms minister, is it Michelle Rowland, I think, has fronted up, reminding kind of publicly, just generally waving a hand across the landscape again, reminding both the AFL 7, Foxtel 10, that from the government's point of view with regard to the anti-siphoning list, the government will not accept less free AFL games get less games on free to air for AFL.
Then there is
currently there's, if I do my math correctly, 4 a week on Channel 7. Because there was some inference that maybe in the negotiation, Foxtel was saying, well, we want to be able to show every game live independently. So where there's overlaps, because there might be a game in Perth versus a game in Melbourne, we don't want one game to overlap on each other. We want it to be effectively nose to tail. So if one game finishes, the next game can start. And that would put Seven in some trouble, because for some of those games, it would mean, we now can't air the game that we want to air in that market because it starts at ludicrous o'clock. You know, if it's a 7 o'clock start in Perth, it's a 9 or 10 o'clock start in Melbourne or Sydney. And if it's Carlton v the West Coast Eagles, that's no good to anyone in Melbourne. So 7 well, that's not a ratings boon for us. Whereas people who subscribe via Foxtel don't care. They want to. They're the people who want to watch it when they want to watch it, which is why KO is so important. So there is negotiations within the 7 Foxtel arrangement around who gets what that ultimately comes down to who pays how much of whatever the end deal is, noting that the anti-siphoning list says every game of AFL needs to be on free-to-air.
But it's not.
Well, this is how they get around it in the arrangement. 7, as the public broadcaster in that deal, can then choose to say, we will not broadcast that game on free-to-air, and they negotiate, obviously, a number of games per week. So Foxtel go, great, we will get it exclusively. Or Foxtel stick their head in there and say, we want it. We want to have that game only on our platforms. And 7 might go, oh, but we really like that one. Oh, but, quid pro quo, Clarice. It'll come out in the wash. We want that one. You want that one. We've worked it out. But if 7, as they do, because they can't show, 8 or 9 games around? They can't show that many games on free-to-air television.
They've got enough as the listeners will know, I don't really care. I don't have a dog in this fight. But they've got enough multi-channels to do this, don't they?
They do,
but they don't want to use their
multi-channels
that way. They don't want to show 2 games.
Oh, yeah, but I'm not talking about what they want. I'm talking about technical capability. There would be enough time and again, I don't know, so I could be 100% off base here, but is it not the case that in theory, if they had enough cameras to point at enough players,
yes,
they would have enough channels and enough time? There wouldn't be games where they'd have to go, well, we've got to show that one, but this other game is on at the exact same time.
You mean like how 10 did some of the A-League games with 1 camera?
Well, sure, you might not get optimal.
But here's the cut and thrust of it, right? Absolutely, 7 have enough multi-channels or even streaming capacity, right, out of 7 plus to show every minute of every AFL game. If, and these numbers have been poo-pooed everywhere, let's say hypothetically, this deal is worth $600 million a year to the AFL, and they're trying to negotiate a 5-year deal, so $3 billion with a B, billion dollars. 7 do not have $300 billion. $3 billion. They don't have $600 million a year to show every minute of every game. That's why Foxtel step in and go, we have both the infrastructure, the audience, and the ability to play all of those things at once.
And the cash.
And the cash to back it up. So in this, let's say it's $600 million a year, 7 hypothetically might pay $100 or $150 million a year of that. And it's not all cash. A whole bunch of it comes to them in kind of like, well, we'll give you, in $100 million, we might give you $50, $60 million a year, and then there's $40 million in advertising that the clubs can use. But has been pointed out in part of the analysis in this whole process, often the clubs can't access it. They can't get it organised in time or can't seem to get the advertising lined up. So it basically goes begging. But 7 pay a minuscule amount, which means that they can't show all of the games. Because Foxtel pay the most, they get all of the games, and 7 have to agree to let them have all the games.
This feels very anti-siphoning list. I mean, and again, not really my specialty area, but wasn't this how SBS ended up with, and I want to say it was World Cup, but it might have been Olympics a bunch of years ago, where Foxtel had to let them show it because it was anti-siphoning stuff?
Yes.
This feels like they're dancing around the corpse of the rules or the intent of the rules.
They absolutely are, and this is part of the problem. And I would hope that the new communications minister would provide some surety, primarily to taxpayers / consumers, by sorting this out. Because ultimately what ends up happening is it's only the grand finals that become the most important widget in the game. And 7 go, no way in the world, that has to be on free-to-air television only. And so Foxtel can only show the grand final after the grand final has aired on 7.
See, I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense to me.
I know.
I can see
this is
the
grand
way.
final, Adam, is this big game that's played at the end of the season. It's very important. I would have thought
won
you'd know
it once
this
in my lifetime, and I was there. It was amazing.
AFL involves a ball and 36 players.
Yeah, I would have thought the point of the anti-siphoning was to make sure it was on free-to-air. So
yes,
as long as it's on 7 where anyone can watch it for free, who gives a shit when Foxtel shows it? Why
But
shouldn't
this is
Foxtel
Well,
be
this is
allowed
the
Foxtel
to?
does.
catch.
Yeah,
Well,
Foxtel does. But
Foxtel
why would they
cares.
not be allowed to show it at the same time?
Because Seven basically at that point stamp their feet and point at the anti-siphoning list and say, you can't air it
But I thought it
before
was to
we air
protect
it.
us, the viewer.
Simultaneous wouldn't feel like a problem to me. I agree with you, Adam.
Are the anti-siphoning laws to protect Seven or to protect me as the viewer? And I know I'm being very naive to think that anything would actually be about me as the viewer. But if they were to protect me as the viewer, who gives a shit what Foxtel's doing?
If we
they
remember back
protect
in the
Seven,
day,
that's why.
the sports fan communications minister of the day that brought in the anti-siphoning list, the Honourable Stephen Conroy, did it with the intention that the Australian public should always be able to watch every game of AFL, NRL, and at the very least, the grand finals. That they should be able to get them for free. Now, there are two very big lobbyists functioning on either side of this, right? You've got Foxtel going, we pay the bulk of this deal. Why can't we at least simulcast air it? So it's on Seven
I don't
and it's
think
on
that's
Foxtel.
unreasonable.
Seven go, hang on, we're the free-to-air television that's been protected by the anti-siphoning list. You don't get to show it until after we've aired it. So it's this swings and roundabouts kind of negotiation that says Seven acknowledge that that's the biggest game all year. That is honestly the game that gets them into the top 10, top 2 programs of the year every year. If it was split, simulcast between Foxtel and Seven, that audience would at least
Seven's
drop by a
audience
third.
would go down.
At least by a
So we're
third.
protecting Seven here, not the viewer.
In this instance, absolutely in the same way that we are protecting Nine with the NRL Grand Final.
Now, are they talking about reviewing the anti-siphoning laws?
Every government has threatened it.
Yeah,
Every government has threatened it.
The talk now is that the idea of reviewing is to make sure that the global streaming services, so basically Amazon and whatever, can't come in and poach sport away. But is that all that it is? Because that doesn't seem to be a big deal. Or are they actually going to rethink the whole thing, or are they going to chuck the whole thing away? It'd be a brave government to chuck the whole thing away.
It would be a brave government that threw it away. Yes, it absolutely needs a rethink. It is at best under the guise of protecting the consumer, and at worst self-protectionist for the free-to-air networks who already no longer pay license fees.
I was going to say they don't pay licensing fees.
They're
get all this
already in
stuff handed to them.
pretty prime position. Look, it would be an interesting proposition because you're right. Prime Video could swoop in for any major code.
Or YouTube
say,
or Google.
Yes, we want all of that. We're going to buy it and we're going to show it on our things, and the only way you can see it is on our things. The anti-siphoning list legislation does not allow them to do that. They would have to have a free-to-air broadcaster partner who showed an amount of those games, and they would ostensibly need to have some buy-in to allow them to do that anyway. But again, the sticking point would be, in the AFL's case, the grand final is the big show. So from a free-to-air perspective, any free-to-air broadcaster in that regard would go, look, we'll capitulate. We'll have just one game around, but we've got the grand final.
It feels to me, again, no dog in this fight, but it feels to me like the boogeyman of an Amazon or an Apple or a Google swooping in and grabbing these rights is kind of ludicrous. Simply because, while I totally admit, and I know plenty of Australians, plenty of our listeners are super passionate about this, and that's lovely, that's great, love what you love, we are a tiny little island nation.
Yep.
Why is Apple going to care about the NRL, which, yes, it has a global audience, but it's mostly expat Australians and just a few other places, rather than doing what, in fact, they've been doing, which is chasing up Major League Baseball rights? It would seem like that's actually more to do with the AFL or the NRL saying, hey, they might buy the rights. Foxtel and the free-to-airs in Australia, you'd better bid more because they might buy the rights.
But
I just don't think they're going to. I can't see why they would.
One of them got the swimming rights.
Prime Video.
Yeah.
But it was only to swimming championships and qualifiers, not to the Olympics. Because in Australia...
But it's still a foot in the door, though.
It is a foot in the door. Look, let's go to the Olympics as something that has a global footprint and global interest. I am firmly of the belief that at some point in the not distant, but certainly not next year, future, Google will pitch and get the global broadcast rights for the Olympics. They will just push a many truckloads of money up to the IOC's door, pour it in them and say, great, thanks very much.
Which
and
is
if you
how
want
the
to watch
Olympics
it,
biddings work, let's be
oh,
honest.
absolutely. The difficulty for Google, and the IOC are well aware of this, is that in every market, each host broadcaster pay a premium to be the exclusive Olympics broadcaster for that region.
Yeah.
So we're back to DVD regions, really.
Mm.
As soon as we can do away with that notion that we need to have regions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just have a Netflix approach. We buy it and we put it in every country. There'll be
That won't
legislation
work
that
for
will
the
have
Olympics,
to
though.
change. Sorry?
Because that won't work for the Olympics because of the commentary.
Well,
Australia doesn't want to watch an American commentary
But
of the
you
swimming.
do what Netflix did with what was it Ultimate Beastmaster? You just have
Yeah.
different commentary streams. You just pay for that. I mean, that's
Well, that's what I was
small
going to say. You
change.
could keep
But
the
that's all
same
they do now.
footage, but you'd have to
Yeah,
have different commentary.
it's
You
true.
couldn't
That's all
send
that
the
happens
one
now.
feed to the
7.
world.
In fact, at the last Commonwealth Games, we have had it now, haven't we? Yes. At the Commonwealth Games, boots on the ground in Birmingham was almost the smallest media contingent they have sent to a Commonwealth Games.
There was
the
a
bulk of the
pandemic, Steve.
commentary happened here.
And that's how the Tour de France works as well. We see the French coverage, all the stats, everything on the screen is written in French. We're just getting the Australian commentators talking over the top of it. But Google would
that's
have to hire commentators for every region.
Yeah, but that's what they would do because that's what happens now. Like legitimately, that's what happens now. Now, I would say there are some events that you could get away with, and let's use the cycling as an example. If you got known global voices that are commentators in an English context or a French context as the people that were commentating the cycling events, cycling fans would love it. Because here's the voices that I love commentating in these different contexts, giving me their views and thoughts on Olympic cycling, whether it's the road races or the track races or the whatever it is. So there is some logistics to it, but let me tell you, it's much easier to solve and much cheaper for a big parent company to buy the entire rights and solve the delivery mechanism into every market than it is for the ISC to go, okay, Australia, okay, United States, okay, Canada, okay, Brazil, okay, UK, okay, Europe. Like it's split it up even sort of within that, but where they have to have individual host broadcaster rights for each of them, and then it's the host nation's responsibility to put out each of the streams. So they give each of the host broadcasters a clean feed, and then you can talk over it or not talk over it, which is why if you watched 7+ during the Olympics, the Winter Olympics or Birmingham, in some cases, you didn't get Australians commentating those events. You just got the standard commentators out of the feed coming out of the media centre.
But, I mean, that works for the Olympics. They are the world in competition. I find it personally hard to believe, again, willing to be wrong, but I find it personally hard to believe that in Buenos Aires or in Arkansas that they're going to care about the AFL Grand Final.
Yeah, look, absolutely. There will be very, very, very small pockets, but yeah, it's not as a concern. For example, Melbourne would be up in arms if they couldn't see.
Oh, I'm aware I can never set foot in Melbourne again. Having said that, there'll be pictures of me in every airport and burning torches, I'm sure. But I still think it's true.
The difficulty that we are racing towards, that everybody seems to be dancing around. While the anti-siphoning list exists, under its current iteration, Foxtel cannot show the grand final live, even simulcast. They just can't. Because the anti-siphoning list says it has to be free-to-air first run. And 7 tromp all over that and go, well, you're not going to show it because we want to get all of the ratings. So that's actually the bulk of the value of our deal, is us getting the grand final exclusively. Now, they have played a lot harder ball in this negotiation, according to the press, because they've said, no, we want to stream now. And no, we want to be able to choose, for example, local games in Western Australia. We want to be able to show them, but show different games in the eastern states. And that hasn't been the model, largely, that they've followed. Foxtel are like, well, we want to change it so that every game is back-to-back, not over the top of each other. And that would work against 7 in some situations. So even within the current broadcaster, who we are led to believe are the lead pitch as the ones that are supposed to be winning the bid at the moment, they still have shit to work out, so that when they go, great, 7 and Foxtel have got it again, here's what it actually means. The devil will be in the detail this time more than it has ever been before.
Well, that just about wraps up another episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Steve for once again joining us.
Hey there.
Now, Steve, you've been on the show so many times before. You know what's coming. It's time for you to face the patented vertical hold 3 questions of doom. I will ask all 3. You can answer them in any order you like. 1, where can people find your work online? 2, where can they find you on social media? And 3, our brand new contentious question of the week. Very appropriate for you. What's the worst TV program you've ever seen?
Holy shit. Okay, so I write and do ratings analysis and a whole bunch of work on tvblackbox.com.au, including the TV Blackbox podcast every week. Tune in to hear me be either a smart ass or get paid out on. If you want to catch me on social media, at TV_Blackbox for all of the formal stuff. Otherwise, it's at Steve Molk on pretty much every platform if you were to care. Predominantly for Instagram about my Lego and smoking meat interests, and everywhere else, whatever takes my fancy at the time. As far as the worst TV I watched, I got to say, Alex, Adam, it's a long list, as you would expect. I've seen some stinkers in my time. If I'm going to keep it super, super current, I have a Paramount Plus subscription, and I tuned in to watch the Australian version of the big new reality format, air quotes, called The Bridge. So this is I think it's an American, it could be a European format. The basic premise is a bunch of people are dropped in the wilderness, and in Australia it is in the back end of Tasmania. And over 17 days, they have to work together to physically build a bridge across a body of water from where they are to an island 330 meters away.
Ooh,
And at the end of that 17 days, one person gets to walk across the bridge and collect $250,000. And they then get to decide whether they keep it for themselves or share it with whoever's left. Right? It sounds, in and of itself, it's actually a pretty great idea and a good format. I can tell you it looks stunning. They have just spared no expense in making this look incredible. And then they fucked it up with the casting. It is the worst reality series cast I have ever seen.
Just no tension or too many obvious, clashing people, or just people who have no on-screen charisma, or all of the above.
Everyone is too self-aware. They all know that they're on a reality TV show, and they all seem to be competing to try and, give you the quote or the line or the
too
moment.
Much scenery chewing.
Oh my God. It's a great idea, and I love, like I said, they make it look incredible, and the challenge and the twists that they throw in, really good. The cast have ruined it for me.
Can I have an answer to this one as well?
Please.
I'm looking back a while, but mine would have to be the US pilot of the remake of Red Dwarf.
Oh,
it is appalling. The only actor in it that's the same is the guy who plays Crichton.
Yep.
And everyone else is just an American ripoff, like light version.
Yep.
And the list is from Chicago, I think, and has an American. It's just like, it's not just the American. The whole thing is just so painfully bad. It never got past the pilot.
It is truly awful if people haven't seen it. The one good thing to come out of that is that Robert Llewellyn got a much better Crichton mask for future Red Dwarf seasons out of it, because they spent a lot of money on it.
Hopefully he got a shitload of cash.
His book on that, The Man in the Rubber Mask, is great reading if people have not read it. And while they work out if they do want to read it, they can catch us online at Vertical Hold AU on Twitter, at the Vertical Hold Facebook page, or on the web at verticalhold.com.au.
Hang on, you don't get out of this. What's the worst show you've ever seen?
Oh, right. Oh, well, that's easy, actually. So the worst show I've seen in recent living memory, and again, it's US remake. This one popped up on the web only this week, is the US remake version from the 1990s of the anime series Sailor Moon.
Oh, wow.
You had to be very into Sailor Moon at the time, which my better half was. The US version, the US theme, oh my God, it's awful. Oof. I mean, it's just... And I don't know why the Americans do this. There's so many. They have one or two quite good reversionings of usually UK shows, and then everything else is just awful, just dire, just terrible. So that'd be my point.
There's a whole list of Australian TV programs and English TV programs that attempted to get remade that never really got any traction or were just completely horrendous in the outcome. Yeah, and probably the less said about them, the better. R.I.P. Kath and Kim. But yeah, there is a long list, and I'm sure that the Vertical Hold listeners have their own, shows
Let us
that
know.
they watch.
Drop us a
Yeah,
line.
yeah.
Twitter,
Yeah.
Facebook. Let
Do
us
it.
know. While we wait to see who's in the US remake of this podcast. Thanks for dropping by for another week. Don't forget to tell your friends about us and help us continue to spread the good word in 2022. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Aussie Broadband, changing the game with their award-winning network and Australian-based support. I'm looking back a while, but mine would have to be the pilot
Joey.
of the US remake of... Fuck, I forgot the name of the
Kath
show.
and
Hang
Kim.
on. No.
Red Dwarf.
Yes.
Oh,
I
yeah,
knew
hang
it.
on.
I knew it.
Wait, let me say that again.
Yeah.